Now, rational people are interested in just one thing, maximizing their wealth. The first generation of behavioral finance called people not rational, but irrational. People who are still trying to maximize their wealth, but make cognitive and emotional errors on the way to do that.
Welcome to the human side of money, a show dedicated to equipping financial advisors with the skill set required to work with emotional human beings on the emotionally charged topic of money. You'll get practical tips and insights on applying behavioral finance into your practice from conversations with fellow advisors, industry consultants, and experts in the fields of behavior, psychology, communication, and more. Each episode is designed to help you enhance client outcomes and forever change the trajectory of your advisory business. Now here's your host, Brendan Frazier.
Meir Statman, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm delighted to be with you, Brendan.
Well, I'm also delighted because I don't think I've told you this yet, but I pretty vividly remember a day in 2018. I think it was the spring of 2018. I'm sitting in a hotel room and I'm reading this article in the Wall Street Journal by this esteemed author named Meir Statman. And I'm sitting there reading it and I'm going through it and I'm like, wow, why is this not more talked about? Why is this not more discussed? What a great way to look at the difference between income and capital and why it's so hard to spend money in retirement. So that was what the article was about. And in that moment, I sit there and I go, all right, whenever this podcast thing gets off the ground and gets launched, that's good. I need to have that guy on as a guest. And so on that day, you went on my spreadsheet list of possible guests. It only took 6 years. So I guess there's that. But here we are. We finally did it. So, and I get to tell these stories every now and then. We have guests on how it's like, I can remember the time where I wanted to have the conversation, and it's pretty cool. Now, quick question as a lead into the next question. You got your bachelor's and your MBA from Hebrew University, and that was in what?
That was in 1970.
And it was around something math related, right? Numbers related.
Well, you can call it that. It was economics and statistics.
Okay.
In Israel, there's not really general education. Undergraduate studies are more like graduate studies here in that you really study a lot in your major. And in my case, it was economics and statistics. Yeah, so it has a lot of numbers in it.
And then the PhD in Columbia.
That is right.
And what was that? Was it focused on anything?
Well, it combined economics and finance. It actually had to do with the pharmaceutical industry and rates of return on drug innovation, quite different from what I'm doing now. But everything is useful, and you learn from everything.
Okay, so that was what I was hoping you were going to say, what I thought you were going to say. But again, it was all very numbers focused, numbers heavy. And you look at it and you go, okay, so you've got this background, your knowledge, your expertise was accumulated in, we'll call it economics, numbers heavy fields. But now here you are, not only writing books, but doing research and even teaching a little bit in behavioral finance. And so on a little bit, not completely separate things, but a different end of the spectrum. And so my question to you is, how does somebody the professor that has a background in economics and accounting and a PhD on rates of return find himself going from just pure numbers background to, wait a minute, there's this behavioral finance field? Because I imagine at the time, whenever this happened, that it probably wasn't very well known that there was this whole human element that needed to be taken into account. So what was the moment for you, this light bulb moment, aha moment, where you went, hang on, there's more to this that we haven't got that I need to explore and learn about and research?
Well, I always knew that there is that part that needs to explore. I just did not know how to do it, because I could see the contradictions between what we studied in theory, for example, that dividends don't matter, and what happens in real life. that investors care very deeply about dividends. So, but what I did not know in 1980, before there was behavioral finance, was that here is theory and here is what people actually do, and the two don't meet. Fortunately for me, I came to Santa Clara and I met my colleague Hersh Shefrin, and Hersh Shefrin was at that time working with Dick Thaler, who is, of course, by now a Nobel Prize winner, on issues that have to do with framing and mental accounting and self-control. And as he presented that work in a seminar that I attended, I immediately jumped to, wait a minute, this explains the dividend puzzle. This explains why it is that theory says that people shouldn't care, and yet people care deeply about dividends. So in 1973, in the summer of 73 is when I came to New York, and that was just before the Yom Kippur War and the energy crisis. And Con Ed, the utility company of New York, found that they have to pay a whole lot more for the oil they were using for their plants, and yet could not raise their prices because they are regulated. And so they had to cut their dividend. And I remember that was in 74, and people in that annual meeting, kind of widows and orphans, they were about to hang the chairman of the board, Mr. Luce. And he explained, I wish I didn't have to do it, but I have to do it. And one woman said, I used to have a husband. Now Con Ed is my husband. I need that dividend. I need that income. Now, of course, Miller and Modigliani, two prominent Nobel Prize winners, showed theoretically that dividends do not matter. And here is why. Because if you don't get your $1,000 worth of dividend, you simply sell $1,000 worth of stock and you get that homemade dividend. But, that woman from Florida who flew in particular for that meeting, she wouldn't take that because selling stocks is dipping into capital, and dipping into capital is a major sin, greater than incest. And so kind of this stayed with me. And so when Hersh talked about those issues of self-control and mental accounting and framing, I thought dividends. And I talked with Hersh, and he was thinking along the same lines. And so we ended up writing a paper that by good luck appeared in a top finance journal that usually that never published anything like that. In fact, there was kind of a major brouhaha about it. But the reviewer, the referee for that paper was Fisher Black of Black-Scholes Options, and he just loved that paper, and it connected in his mind to what happened in MIT about how the university says to the faculty, the only thing we can give you is dividends. And so, the editor said, after a lot of soul searching, I guess I agree. But it was published, and off we went to the races, and at that time there was no such thing as behavioral finance. And that really is that work kind of builds on Kahneman and Tversky. Okay, so here's another related story. I studied at the Hebrew University. I studied those theories, Miller, Modigliani, and so on, rational behavior. The building right next to the economics building was a psychology building. and I would walk over there to participate in experiments to earn some pocket money. But I had no idea that at that time, Kahneman and Tversky were there in that building doing the work that we know now has been revolutionary, because there was really a disconnect. It was a time of standard finance, rational finance. And so when you start as a professor, the most important thing is to get tenure. And for that, you have to publish. And so I did what I could under those conditions. But when I finally found a way to expand that circle of finance, to include elements from psychology, I just jumped on it, because here's a way to connect theory with real life. And that really is what every science should do.
Now, as you were doing that, making that connection, was it always well received with open arms of like, yeah, we recognize that this is an element of finance and economics? Or like, was there at that point in time kind of like, okay, come on, like pushback of any sort? Like you said that when you first published the article, you were surprised that they even let it in there and there was some brouhaha. But as you kept down this path, was there ever any pushback?
There was a lot of pushback. I met one of my colleagues at a conference not long after it was published in 1984. And he said, Meir, this is a very neat paper, but I cannot teach it to my students. It is not rational. And I was thinking, wow, I don't care if it's rational or not. It is close to real life. And that is what happens. And so there was a lot of pushback. Now, when you look at it, you see that it is gone. Now you see behavioral finance everywhere. But I always try to be at the frontier and moving forward with that. And you see that in my book. Wanting tenure, I was working on all cylinders. I was working on standard finance. I was working on this thing that became behavioral finance. I did many things, and I did get tenure. so that surely worked. But there was always greater acceptance, greater really understanding among people like financial advisors, because financial advisors deal with normal people, and they know that people, for example, make a distinction between capital and income, and they know that people care about dividends, and so there was greater reception, better reception there. And what is interesting is that among the top people in finance, Bill Sharpe, for example, another Nobel Prize winner, they understood it. They understood it. It is really the people, the assistant professors, who did not get it. But the people at the top, some of them, not all of them, got that. And so people like Peter Bernstein, who was not an academic, but he was really an academic in terms of his work, got that, and really was a mentor to me. People like Harry Markowitz, we ended up writing papers together. Harry and I, as you know, of course, he passed away not very long ago. And by now it is really everywhere. But in some way, I used to say, let them look down on it. Let them not touch it, because this way they leave all the good topics to me and I don't have to rush. By now, of course, I have to rush. And instead of really rushing to the old stuff, I try to write new stuff.
Yeah. So I think you might be you might have the best perspective of maybe anyone out there, or at least you're in the select few to ask this question to, based on your tenure and experience doing this, but also your focus today. So can you, for anybody that's listening that doesn't know, or that maybe you could, or that you kind of have an idea, can you take us through what we've seen is industry wide, but also just even bigger picture, what we've seen as far as the evolution from, I think, what you call standard finance to the behavioral finance point that we're at today?
So as I just said, when I was a student at the Hebrew University, that was late 60s, it was standard finance. It was rational finance. People who are rational don't really distinguish capital gains from dividends. They don't distinguish income from capital, and so on. And they were not really interested much in evidence that contradicted that. Now, as I said, in 1980, Hersh Shefrin and I started what did not really have a name, which became the first generation of behavioral finance. And Fisher Black invited Hersh and me to arrange a conference presentation session at the American Finance Association. And we called it, I think, Applications of Psychology to Markets, or something like that. It was not behavioral finance. And this is where I presented the paper on what we call now the disposition effect. That is the disposition not to realize losses, to realize gains quickly, but not realize losses. And so now rational people are interested in just one thing, maximizing their wealth. The first generation of behavioral finance called people not rational, but irrational. People who are still trying to maximize their wealth, but make cognitive and emotional errors on the way to do that. For example, they make the cognitive error of not realizing losses or trading too much that reduces wealth rather than increases.
Right.
And from there, I moved on to what I call the second generation of behavioral finance. And I said, look, stocks, hedge funds, bonds, they are like watches and cars and restaurant meals. That is, when we buy a watch, we know that a $50 watch will give you the precise time, and it's pretty reliable. And a $5,000 watch will also give you the same time. So why is it that people buy $5,000 watches or 50 or 100,000 watches? Well, those people are not irrational. Those people are normal. And what they want, in addition to the utilitarian benefit of a watch, which is show me the time, they also want expressive and emotional benefits. They want to show themselves as people who can afford a luxury watch. So it kind of tells people that they are wealthy without them having to brag about it. And they get an emotional kick from how beautiful that a watch is, Patek Philippe, or anything of that kind. And so I said, we have to move to what it is that people want and what it is that investors want. They want utilitarian benefits, returns, but they also want expressive and emotional benefits. And socially responsible investing is a prime example of that, and sometimes people are willing to give up some of their returns to be true to their values. And then I expanded that circle of finance further, and that is in my current book, A Wealth of Well-Being. And I said, what is it that people want? Eventually, what they want is well-being, happiness. Well-being is a better word, a better term that describe that financial well-being, money, underlies everything, underlies family, underlies friendship, underlies work and education. But eventually, what really matters is well-being. And so when you ask people what is important in life, the first thing they're likely to say is family, not money. But there's kind of a disconnect. In finance, we talk about money. In real life, people talk about family. People talk about work. And so I sought to bring it together. And there's a huge literature about well-being, as I mentioned, by psychologists and sociologists and economists and so on. And so what I sought to do was to take that precise literature, academic studies tend to be precise but dry, and couple them with stories, real stories that illustrate them and bring those dry findings to life.
Okay, so definitely here in just a second, want to dive in deeper and talk about the idea of well-being and behavioral finance 3.0. That's kind of where, that's sort of where we're at now, is the third generation focusing on well-being. And this is kind of I don't know if this is a fair question or not, because I'm saying, do you have a crystal ball to look into the future? But as I was reading the book and thinking through this earlier, I was sitting there thinking, like, if that's the third generation, do you have any idea, any forecasts as to what the fourth generation is going to look like yet? Or do we just go along for the ride and we'll figure it out when it comes?
Yeah.
Can you predict the future?
Yeah, we'll figure it out as we go. I say now that this has been expanding the circle of finance has been a drive throughout my career. But I really did not know that in 1980. It's not like I had this long-term plan. Looking back, I can see that is what it was. Where will it go? So, as I say, people talk about the frontier of finance, and they say, what is on the frontier of finance? Is it AI? Is it ESG? I say it is all within the circle of finance. The third generation of behavioral finance does not obliterate everything that came before that. There are still things like you shouldn't trade too much that comes, say, from standard finance and rational, and it is still good advice. There are still cognitive and emotional errors that are worth overcoming. There are still people who buy hedge funds because this way they can mention that they're into hedge fund, and people who listen to them know that they're wealthy people. And so they can signal that as they signal with a luxury watch. But there's also that ultimate life well-being that is there. What will come next? I don't know. I think that what will happen really is that different people will push on that circle, push it out in many directions. AI is one direction. Socially responsible, ESG is another direction. Well-being is another direction. And each of us figures out what we are good at, and we push in that area where we are good.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's certainly still a lot of work to be done in this third generation around well-being. So I don't think we're moving out of it or away from it anytime soon, but I know everybody always wants to be able to predict the future. So I at least had to ask. Now, before we dive into 3.0, the third generation of well-being, I want to go back real quick to the second generation and the example that you gave around the benefits of something, right? Like the utilitarian benefits, expressive and emotional benefits. You gave the example of the watch, which I think is a great one. The other one that comes to mind when I think through that is like a car, right? So like, yeah, some people look at it and go, hey, that car, whatever you get, it's going to get you from point A to point B, no matter what. Like it's going to serve the same purpose and the same function. And then I go, okay, from the expressive standpoint, like I could see and maybe justify, like I want to buy a nicer car because it can express to other people that all the hard work that I put in at work has turned around and paid me back in the form of wealth and monetary wealth, financial capital. And so I get to show it off and say, hey, here's look, I am successful. It can be an expression of achievement and success. And feel free to add to that if you want. But where I keep getting stuck is there an emotional benefit to buying a car that does more than just, let me put it this way. Is there an emotional benefit to buying the $110,000 car rather than the $40,000 car that gets me to the same destination?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look at those sports car. In fact, they are gas guzzlers. So utilitarian benefits, you actually get losses. They're more likely to be stolen, so you have to put some guard on them when you park them. But you get the zoom. In fact, even okay, so years ago, when I was just turned 40, I remembered that when I was a high schooler, I had a neighbor who had an MG, British sports car. Well, it was way, way beyond my means. But when I was 40, it was within my means. And I had that midlife crisis. And so I bought one of these. It was a lemon. It was really one where I had to call the AAA before I left on the way to just alert them that it's likely that I'm going to call them from the road. But it made me feel like I am a teenager again. So that emotional benefit was definitely there, and an expressive benefit that said, you are 40, but you still kind of look like somebody who buys a sports car. Now that one was used and it was not very expensive, and so it was not a major thing, but it ended up costing a good amount of money in repairs. So the general point I'm making is that many people in finance make a distinction between what they do in their scholarship and what goes on in their lives. They will buy a sports car for the same reason I described, but they will not even think about it this way because it does not go into their models. I cannot make that. In fact, I use my own experiences and wishes as a laboratory, and I say, if I feel this way, if I care about expressive and emotional benefits, surely other people do. And so it is really important if it has to do with money, and of course everything has to do with money, then I have to include it in my scholarship, not just as something like gardening, that I do in my free time.
Well, I think this also explains why anytime you fly internationally, you fly business class.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because there are, I say, bring joy to yourself and to others. So financial advisors, for example, they speak all the time about the need to save. But if you speak with them and you ask them about their elderly clients, they're likely to tell you that more often than not, their problem is with clients who have millions that they have saved and the stock market helped and so on. And now their problem is to let go of saving and enjoy the money they have. And I am an example of that. And so how will I spend that money? Now I can see that I am really at the bracket where estate tax is going to apply to me. So I ask myself, what brings me joy? Now, Michelin restaurant meals don't do that for me, okay? I know that pate is chopped liver. But I say I am old enough and wealthy enough to pay for business class tickets rather than be on the wait list and possibly not be chosen in it. And so if somebody next to me in business class paid a fraction of what I paid, I say, who cares? I have that money. It brings me joy. That's fine. And we also, Nava, my wife, and I will contribute huge amounts to the National Alliance on Mental Illness and other causes. And we've established an endowment of several $1 million at Santa Clara University to support the work of my colleagues in the Department of Finance. And so it is really an opportunity for us to say, we treat ourselves well, we fly business class, but we treat our community well, we share and share alike.
And I mean, so I guess I would add this too. This is also coming from the person, if I understand right, drove the same car for how many years?
I drove my car, my Toyota Camry station wagon, for 30 years. I gave it away as a gift to a person who's a handyman for me, who does a lot of good work for me, and who is a friend. And his car broke down, and he has much less than I do. And so, I didn't try to sell it. I just gave it as a gift. He benefited. I benefit. I feel like I am a decent person who is generous because he can. Not all people can afford to just give away a car that is in perfect condition. That is a year ago, I in fact replaced the transmission that cost some more than $3,000. So it wasn't really good shape. But it brings me joy to give him a car that is reliable, that he can use. And it surely does not matter to me. For me, it is just a number. My stock portfolio goes up and down by many thousands of dollars every day. And $3,000 is really pretty small relative to that.
Do you check it every day?
Yeah, I actually do. I check it, but I don't check it so that I can decide when to buy or sell. My money market fund is also one of these. And so I know the balance I have. Sometimes I write checks on that. I write checks, say, for quarterly payments on my taxes on it, and sometimes other large expenses rather than my regular checking account in a bank. And so I know what it is. But I just shrug, it goes up, it goes down by huge amounts, but I just shrug. But you can say that I am really reasonably impervious to risk, but I'm very sensitive to regret. So if I have to make a decision to move money from one fund to another, or one fund company to another, as I had to do some years ago when I moved money from Fidelity to TIAA, and the money was in cash for a week or 10 days, I lost sleep over the possibility that while my money is in cash, the stock market zooms and leaves me behind. It is still whatever, tens of thousands of dollars one way or the other, but that would make me very unhappy. And so I had a contract with myself. I said, Meir, if the stock market zooms while the money is in cash, don't feel regret. It's not your responsibility. If it goes down, don't feel pride. It is not your doing. As it happened, the stock market went down when my money was in cash. Nice. And so I gained. And so I now fight that desire to feel pride when it is not earned.
That's funny to me because there's so many people out there, especially when it comes to the psychology and behavioral aspect of it. They would say, hey, whatever you do, there's no need to check your account that often. Don't check your account too often, right? Like just leave it alone. If you check it too much, then you may be more prone to react emotionally to the constant ups and downs. And then here you are looking at it on a regular basis, obviously not to your detriment, but I sit here and I think like, well, it must serve some benefit to you. Like you must get something out of checking it every day. Because I'm sure you've probably heard like, oh, there's no need to check it every day. You're better off if you don't look at it that often.
Well, one of the interesting findings is that people check their accounts more often when they know that the stock market is going up. So people get kind of an emotional benefit out of seeing them, so they knew that they had 1 million before. Now they have 1 million and 40,000. They're not going to take the money out, but they just feel good that they can actually look at that number and see that. And if you say, I don't understand those people. Well, I understand those people. I am more inclined to check when I know that the stock market is going up than when I know that it's going down.
So if we think back to, and you said this a little bit or alluded to it, but if we think back to the fact that you buy these business class tickets, but you drove the same car for 30 years, that like it sounds to me like there's this element of it's about, and I think the word you used was joy. It's about figuring out the things or finding the things to spend your money on that bring joy, that are meaningful and bring joy. And so like flying business class would be more meaningful, bringing more joy than driving a brand new car every year. Then you also mentioned that you don't necessarily want to go to a Michelin starred restaurant. So my first question on that, along those lines, is have you been to a Michelin starred restaurant before?
Yeah, as it happened, I did. Yeah, I did not pick up the tab. I was in a group where somebody is very keen on Michelin star restaurants. And I can tell you that my story about pate being chopped liver is true. I did not, if you didn't tell me that it was a Michelin star restaurant, I would not know. It's kind of like wine. Some people are connoisseurs of wine. Now, I don't know. I mean, I used to make fun of them, but I don't do anymore because it really hurts their feelings. But I have the sense that they don't know what they're talking about. But who knows? Maybe they do. I kind of describe myself as a connoisseur of olives. Having grown up in Israel, I can tell the difference between Kalamata and Syrian green and Syrian red and cracked and not. I know what is good to my taste. But again, when I used to say that when people start talking about wine, but it really hurts their feelings. And I don't do that because I'm a nice guy and I don't like to hurt people's feelings.
But you went to this Michelin starred restaurant and you did it, you tried it, you experimented with it, you experienced it, and you learned that you just don't really, I guess maybe how would you put it? Like you don't get much joy from it.
Absolutely. It does not bring me joy. I mean, I know the difference between say a good Vietnamese restaurant and McDonald's. Okay, so it's not like I'm totally oblivious that I'm just looking for the utilitarian benefits, calories, vitamins, and so on. I know that taste matters, and I would like stuff to be arranged nicely on a plate and have different colors and all of that. But that's about where it ends, that is, the last thing I want is to have a waiter hovering over me, explaining the ingredients and all of that stuff. And I hate it when people who have dinner with me, want to speak with the waiter about all of those ingredients and so on. I say, whoa, please stop. Please be kind to me. But as I said, I'm a nice guy, so I said nothing.
The thing that I like, the reason I bring it up, the thing I like about it though is I think there's a lot of people out there who say that they don't like, want, or enjoy certain things, right? So that, for example, they'll go, why would you ever fly business class? Why would you ever go eat at a Michelin-starred restaurant? Why would you ever drive the nice car? Why would you ever stay at a 5-star expensive hotel when the utilitarian benefits are the same? And the thing that always frustrates me is it's like, the reason why I ask is because it's like, you can't really know if you don't at least try or experiment with it. And how else are you going to find the things that bring you true joy, meaning, purpose, happiness, if you don't try it, right? There's something to be said for experimenting to learn what those things are or aren't. And now here you are with the new car. And my question would be, do you wish you would have gotten it sooner?
No.
Okay.
No. In fact, my wife bought me a Subaru, which is now my car, Subaru Outback. It has wonderful features, it will stop or slow down the car if the car in front of me slows or stops. It tells me when it is safe to change lanes or not. But it took me a while when I kind of drove them side by side, one day this and one day that, until I finally was sufficiently friendly with the Subaru to switch altogether and give away my Toyota. You have to try, but many things you can just think about it even without trying. Even if I did not go to a Michelin star restaurant, I know my taste well enough to know that it would not bring me joy that is comparable to the price that I'll be paying. So that is done. So, financial advisors, when I speak to them, often come and they say, you are describing my parents.
Yeah.
And I say, talk to them, ask them what will bring them joy. For example, how about establishing a fund to pay the college tuition of their grandkids? They might like that. Sometimes you have to kind of force them. My mother-in-law, when she was old, she had a sofa that was rickety, and her kids wanted her to change that, but she didn't want to. So finally, my wife and her 2 brothers bought a new sofa and tossed out the rickety one. And she just looked at them and she said, smiling, well, you are dipping into your inheritance. Good. Sometimes you have to get a contractor who will rip out that orange shag carpeting and replace it with hardwood floors or oriental rugs or whatever it is, because the old people say, I don't need it. And when you buy a house that belonged to all elderly people, you say, how do they live in this house? The cabinet of that kitchen are really, they should have been replaced decades ago. But for them, it was good enough. But sometimes, they can be nudged to do like in this case, enjoy a new sofa or enjoy a remodel of the kitchen, even if you say that you don't want to.
What did you say? It was your mother-in-law that didn't want the new sofa?
Yeah.
If she was on here right now and we asked her, why did you not want the new sofa? What do you think she would have said?
Oh, she would say that the one I had was perfectly fine. I never fell off it. It never disintegrated. I didn't even notice that the fabric is a bit faded. I don't really need that. And besides, I'm not going to live that long. you know, my wife and her brothers said, you have that money. In fact, they had accounts that they had kind of co-owned control over it, you know, and so yeah, they dipped into their inheritance, because otherwise that money would have been left to them. But they thought that after their mother in fact experienced that, she's going to say just that, smile and say thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you, as we know by now, anybody listening to us, you wrote another book around the third generation of behavioral finance, Wealth of Well-Being. And so definitely want to spend a little time diving into well-being in general. As a foundation for that conversation, I'm curious, as you decided to take on this project, write this book, what was your hope, or what was your purpose in writing? What were you hoping to accomplish by writing this book?
So I was trying to serve readers, financial advisors, but also academics and also general readers. And I was trying to expand that circle of finance, as I said. And I said to myself this: there is this huge literature, again, by economists and sociologists and psychologists and law scholars who speak about well-being and do rigorous studies in that. That literature is really not known to financial advisors. Now, you know, people write, of course, a lot about well-being, but here you have a scientific literature, and some of it is not necessarily intuitive, and so you look at that, but then, of course, just summarizing academic studies, that is precise, but it is boring, and so I married to it stories from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and Atlantic Magazine and everywhere else that talk about real things. You know, a woman, a writer for the New York Times, wrote about her daughter. She was 14, suffering cancer for a long time, and then she died. You know, you think to yourself, what pain can be greater than the pain of losing a child?
Right.
But she says, I also have her younger sister, and her younger sister is very much alive. She wants to run with me to the park. She wants to discover the world anew. She cannot just give up and sit and wallow in their sorry. You know, life well-being is a portfolio. There is work, there are other kids, there is marriage, there is religion and society. All of those things matter. And what we try to do, I know from my own experience, and I know from experiences like the one that I just described, that what people do is that, like in a portfolio, not all stocks are going to be winners. Sometimes we just dwell on the losers. You know, we make ourselves miserable and so on. But an advisor is going to say to a client who is complaining about, say, putting money in international that sucked, look at it. What I'm trying to do for you is to diversify your portfolio. I don't know ahead of time which is going to be the winner and which is then the loser. This is why you put money in both kinds. And the same applies to life. That is, there's no one thing that is most important. You know, it's not like Maslow hierarchy that you move from having food to self-actualization. What you have really is a portfolio. It's kind of flat, but it has many domains. For some people, family brings some joy, but not a whole lot. But their work brings a lot of joy. For other people, it is education. For other people, it is society. I was reading about a woman whose passion was social change. She was really caring about the poor and ran to Congress on that, and she never made it. But in the process, she really neglected her daughter. Now, from the daughter's perspective, of course, it was not pleasant. But from the mother's perspective, she thought that my contribution to the world is more important than my contribution to my child. Do I agree with it? No, but that is what brought her joy. And so different people will find joy in different things, in different domains of their life. Some people choose to be single, some people, so people say the most important thing is marriage. No, no, it may be important for me or for you. It's not important to others. Some people choose to combine their finances when they get married. Some people choose to keep it separate. Now, we have some evidence that says that well-being tends to be greater if you combine your finances. But, if you choose not to, surely I will not come knock on the door and tell you those results. This is why I think that when people read the book, they are going to kind of see people like them, people who are different. They're going to think about their well-being. They might change their behavior or not, but at least they're going to see what is around them and how it works. People in India, many people, I know lots of people from India. Many of them have been married by arranged marriages, which is not forced marriages. It is just that parents kind of select possible candidates, and then the potential bride and groom meet, and they decide whether they have enough in common to continue or not. And the ones I know who have that are very happy. An Orthodox woman who was married this way now does that for her daughter. She has been married now for 30 years, happily. And she said, this way, my daughter does not have to kiss many frogs before she finds her prince. Okay. And I look at that and I smile as you do. And I say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It is really sad to see how people live together for 5 years and then break up and so on. I was 22 when I got married. My wife was 21. And so we've been married for more than 55 years now. Was there somebody else who would have been even better for me than Nava? Maybe.
Let's hope she doesn't listen to this episode.
Yeah, I surely did not spend my time. I love Nava. I knew all the features. And I said, this is right for me. Optimal? I don't know. Who cares? I'm not trying to maximize my life. I'm just trying to enhance my well-being.
Okay, that's interesting. What do you see as the difference between maximizing your life and enhancing your well-being?
Well, you can say that in maximizing, lots of young people, now people marry in their 30s. And kind of they say, well, there's such a selection. If you're a man and heterosexual, you're looking for a woman, but you're looking for just the right woman. And so you try, you live for 2 years together, and then you decide, or the other side decides that it is not right. And before you know it, you are in your late 30s, and you did not find your prince. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. I don't know. Sometimes I tell my students, my undergraduate students, I say, you have so many people, men and women around you in college now who are going to be wonderful mates. Find one, perhaps even get married before you graduate, as I did. But I don't think that they like that advice. I think that they're into maximizing, into finding just the right person. And by the time they figure out that there is not that right person, it might well be too late.
Yeah. So you say, you have this quote in the book that says, life well-being comes when we live satisfying lives full of meaning and purpose. How, maybe dive into that a little bit, and then also with some clarity around where does money play into that and fit into that?
So we need financial well-being. That is, financial well-being comes when you manage your spending and saving now, when you are young or middle-aged, and later, say when you stop working and you live on your savings. You need financial well-being, as I said, because you need to pay for education, yours and the children. You have to pay for medical care. You have to support your family and yourself. You need money. But you know that eventually it is those other things that matter, family and education and work and health and the rest of them. And so at the end, it is really that well-being that matters. Now, it is really very important to note, there is a very famous finding of that U curve that is a shape like the letter U. Well-being declines from early adulthood to middle age and then starts to go up. Now, the reason for that, there are good reasons for that. And you should not really seek too much well-being early on because you can get well-being by going to a party rather than studying for the exam. But it's likely you're going to fail that exam, and then it's going to have consequences in terms of your being admitted, say, to medical school or whatever it is. And so in the early years, your aspirations are higher than where you are. Mine were, that is, I had to finish my PhD. I mean, it can be really frustrating. Mm-hmm. I had to find a job as a professor. I had to get tenure. I had to move from assistant professor to associate to a chair professor. That was all with anxiety, all with work, all sometimes with misery. But I get rewarded. In the same way, I saved. I didn't spend everything I earned. I saved. I put it in the stock market and bond. Now, I just lower my aspirations. That is now, somebody forgot to quote my work in his or her paper. Who cares? It used to annoy me when I was young. The nice thing about growing old is that, you learn to shrug. Who cares? And so I declare myself having arrived at my destination. I didn't know that destination, but, I see people who are, say, also professors who have a lot more money than I do. And for a moment I say, wow, I have to hurry up and catch up to them. And then I say, calm down, Meir. Okay. You have enough, to have established, an endowment at your university with several $1 million. What difference does it make? That other fellow might be able to contribute 50 million and you can contribute only a handful of million. But both of you are in the same situation. You have more money than you need, and you choose how to spend it in ways that increase your joy, increase your well-being.
Is the message there that your social circles influence and impact your well-being, right? So in other words, if you look at and compare yourself to the person that has more, even though you're doing, well, not you, but anybody, let's say objectively, you're doing well by most measures. But if you're around people who are wealthier, who are doing more, who are, we'll just call it wealthier, like that comparison could actually impact your well-being, regardless of your financial situation. The social element or who you surround yourself with, it has an impact.
Absolutely. It really, I mean, there's been a study that found that if your neighbors get a bump in their income of, say, whatever, $50,000, it feels as if you've lost $50,000 if you socialize with them, if they are in your comparison group. So we are very competitive, and we measure our well-being not just by how much we have, but how much we have relative to somebody else. A sociologist interviewed very wealthy people in Manhattan. So she interviewed a woman whose family income, annual income, was more than $2 million, and whose wealth is many times $2 million. And that woman said, I guess we are in the middle, because there are so many people who have much more. They have chauffeurs, they have private airplanes. And I'm thinking, whoa, I don't have a chauffeur. I don't have a private plane. I suppose that we have this tendency always to look up. And this is what our mother said. Don't always look up. Compare yourself to people who have less. And that really is important. When I told my younger daughter that we have established this endowment at the university, I said, there's going to be plenty of money left for you. And she said, I already received my inheritance, because she indeed received a lot of help, a lot of money to buy her first house and to buy her second house. And she gets annual gifts from us. But she looks down. She knows that many of her friends do not have wealthy parents, do not have this ability to give them hundreds of thousands for down payment on a house. And she is grateful for that, rather than say, give me more for a fancier house. I found out that she and her husband contribute each year $6,000 to charity, to various causes that matter to them. Made me really proud. I must have done something good in raising her.
So I found an article that you wrote. I couldn't find the date on it, but there's around this idea of social comparison, that one of the quotes, I guess it comes from a book from 1930 called The Conquest of Happiness, says, beggars don't envy millionaires, just other beggars who are more successful. And then right below that it goes back to what you mentioned a second ago, that an increase in your neighbor's income reduces your well-being just as much as an equal reduction in your own income. And so as I was reading that, and as you're mentioning this a second ago, I'm sitting there thinking, like, does that mean that I need to just go cut ties with all my friends that are successful and have more money, and then hang out with all the ones who don't? Like, sometimes it's hard to to connect those dots in your head and go, okay, if that's true, how do I navigate this?
Well, it is a real question. So somebody I quote in this book, A Wealth of Wellbeing, so he says that he is a journalist, and his friends are bankers. His friends, he said, don't think anything about spending $300 on dinner and double that on fine wine. Well, it is not within his budget. So how can he keep his friends and yet, run with them? And so a really good question of how do you do that? I'm not in the business of giving an advice, but you can see that you don't necessarily have to give up on your friends, but you can say, I'm going to skip these, but I'll do with you some other thing. We'll go for walks. We're going to go on a jog together, and so on. And some women or a man say to a classmate who is now getting married, I wish I could join you for the wedding in Maui, but I don't have the money for the airfare and the hotel and the gift and so on. So I'm sorry. And some people take it well and some people don't. But it takes money, and you have to navigate that balance between friendship and money. And if you see that your friend is really mad at you because you cannot go to Maui with them, maybe they're not very good friends.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So what about if we switch over to just like the financial side of things, the money side of things? Can money in and of itself boost or enhance well-being, whether it be the amount that you make or the amount of wealth that you have? Like, does money have money in and of itself on its own in isolation? Does it have a direct impact on well-being?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even without comparisons. If you earn 100,000, if you double it to 200,000, you're going to be happier. You're going to judge your life better. If you earn $1 million, or $1.5 million, it makes a difference. Now, at the margin, it makes less and less of a difference. That is going from 30,000 to 90,000, is a big deal. Going from 90 to even 300 is not as big a deal. So the marginal value goes down, other than comparison with other people. But you really have to kind of choose carefully. That is, I worked with a money manager who was a billionaire. We worked on papers together. We worked like two academics side by side. I am not in his comparison group, but I'm kind of saying to myself, well, yeah, he has those billions, but quite frankly, he is chained to his business. That is, if I get up in the morning and don't feel like working, my mind is not entirely engaged, I say, yeah, just sit down, go out for a walk and so on. He cannot, he has a business to manage. There are thousands of people working for him. So good for him and good for me. We are in different domains whatsoever.
If we look at, well, actually, this is one of the things I've been really interested to ask you, is if we took a snapshot of you and your life prior to really starting to dig in and research and study this idea of overall well-being and life well-being, and then we took a snapshot of your life today after having done the research, written about it, published a book on it, gone on podcasts and talked about it, what looks different in what did you learn along the way? What looks different in your life today than it did before you started from a well-being perspective? What have you done anything in particular from what you learned to improve your own well-being?
So, yes, one of the things that I've learned, coming back to what we talked about just before, is try not compare yourself to others. It's very hard, but at least choose wisely. Okay, don't choose groups that are way beyond your reach. But also think about education. Really, this fascination, this desire to go to a Ivy League college, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, that was not such a big deal 50 years ago. It has become a big deal. Why? So that was kind of puzzling. Now, I live in Silicon Valley. As I mentioned, there are lots of people from India here. They all have wonderful education from India, jobs in high tech. The high school that we have nearby is very competitive, extremely competitive. And all the kids and their parents aim for Ivy League colleges. What does it come from? It's not in every place that is that. So economists kind of looked at it and they said, well, one possible reason is that you have lower costs of attending college far from home. So airfare is now lower than it was 50 years ago relative to income. Phone calls are cheaper. It used to be that I remember when you talked in 3-minute increments, okay, and it costs a good amount relative to income. And so now a kid from Silicon Valley does not think much about going to Harvard if he or she can make it. Or think about the immigration from China and India. Now, in 1965, they changed the immigration law, and I'm one of the beneficiaries. Now I'm a citizen, but I was not born in this country. They changed it such that it became much easier for people from China and India to immigrate. And those who immigrated, there was a preference for people who had high levels of education. So the people who immigrated tended to be people who graduated from top universities in China or India. And in China and India, it matters a big deal if you graduated from a top university or just a plain university. And so they bring with them that culture and they press their kids in the same way. And so, when I talked with a good neighbor, who had 2 kids, now both of them in college, he got the point, this is not India anymore. And what is really important is to get the right college. So his son, for example, is going to a college that is not in the Ivy League, but has a wonderful program in engineering. And that is what is interesting to that kid. Good for him. He has learned that. But in other cases, there are really sad stories where kids are being pushed beyond what they can take. And so, it kind of said something to me about what I should think of myself and what I should know and advise perhaps others, and how I think about it. I teach at Santa Clara. It's not an Ivy League college, but it's a wonderful, wonderful college, and I am very, very grateful for that opportunity. Would I be happier at Harvard? I doubt it. I am really happy here. For one thing, Santa Clara lets me do all kinds of scholarship that are not going to be regarded as valuable in an Ivy League college. And so it fits me much better.
So as we come to the end, before we move into the rapid fire 3-pack of questions, one more question for you. If I'm an advisor, financial advisor who likes this, let's say I get the book that I'm holding up here for people that can't see it. I get the book, I listen to this podcast, I learn about well-being and life well-being. What, in your mind, what would you say? What's an idea or a way? If an advisor came and said, "Hey, this is awesome. This is great. I love this concept and learning about well-being. What do you see as? How do you see as a way that I can use this in my business or in my practice in a meaningful way? How could I apply it?" That would be one variation of the question. The other variation, and you can go one or both routes here, I suppose. The other variation would be, have you heard of or do you know any advisors? Have you heard stories of someone who has sort of taken it and then done something with it? So you can go one or both ways with that. The ultimate question is, if I'm an advisor and I go, this is awesome, I need to incorporate this and do something about it, how do you envision it being done effectively?
So one way I think that is useful is using my book, forgive me for the commercial, sharing it with clients.
Yeah.
Lots of advisors are already well-being advisors, even though they don't use the term. They say that they are wealth managers. But they care about and help people with their lives beyond their finances.
Right.
But some advisors find it difficult to cross over from finances to life. And one woman, a financial advisor, asked me, she said, women find it easier to cross from finances to life than men. Isn't it so? And I said, yes, it is so. I can see the difference between me and my wife. But I am a shy man by nature. And here I am standing on the stage speaking to hundreds of you. So it is a skill. But my book, I think, can help in that crossing because it speaks about family. It speaks about education. It speaks about society. And so if you share it with clients, then you can engage them in conversations simply by asking, what did you find useful? What did you find new? What do you agree with? What you don't? And then can come, here is how you can change things. Sometimes it is just a perception. So your friend's son is going to Harvard and your son goes to Santa Clara. Graduates of Santa Clara do really well. And so you can get that perspective. So that really is one way of doing that. Now, the other thing is that, as I just mentioned, I think most advisors are already well-being advisors if they are not calling themselves that. They should take pride in their work and they should do more of that. That is, it is a problem in the profession because people pay you supposedly to beat the market or to manage the finances or even to help you with a trust and a will and taxes and so on. But a big part of your service is really being a well-being advisor. So take pride in that and speak about it with your clients. And they might not see it this way, and you should not kind of say, I am a well-being advisor. I don't really care about the money part. No, you care about both. This is why forever I've been using the term financial physician. That is, you want the physician who is going to be at the frontier of knowledge of medicine, but also have bedside manner. Also speak to you as a person, listen to you. Right. Same thing with advisors, except that instead of medicine, it is finance. This really is some of the things that advisors are doing and can perhaps do better with my book.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. And really kind of the main point there is that just by default almost, advisors are well-being advisors. In other words, like you can't separate money and life. They're intertwined, as you've said in the book. Like your finances underpin all these other areas of your life and well-being, and so just by default, like those things are going to come together. So you're already operating that way. What I find with a lot of advisors is they recognize that. And they go, I know I'm kind of already doing this in a way, but then the light clicks, the light bulb goes off, and they go, I want to do it a little bit more deliberately and intentionally, right? I don't want to just like stumble into it or have it just show up by default. I want to like focus on this and do it more intentionally. So that's where the question comes from. But I think you're exactly right that it by just at the core, the job at its core requires an element of it to some degree.
Yeah.
So, all right. If you're ready for it, we're going to go to the rapid fire 3-pack of questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. You get to sit back and observe a roundtable discussion. Any 3 people having a conversation about behavioral finance. And the good news is we can actually add a seat if we need to. The better news is that we can bring people back from the dead, but you get to sit back and watch this take place. Who's at the table having this conversation?
So, Paul Slovic is not as well known as Kahneman and Tversky, but his contributions to our understanding of behavior and suppose behavioral finance is pretty much as great or almost as great. And so I would like to have him. He is one who really focused more recently on emotions, on about affect. When we look at a house, there's a notion of curb appeal. The same thing applies to stocks and bonds and other things, that is, when you think about hedge funds, they have not just the utilitarian benefits, but those expressive and emotional benefits. And I would like to bring from the dead both Kahneman and Tversky. I want to ask them, how do they see the development of the field? For example, I know that Tversky, who was more an aficionado of mathematics early on, didn't really want to deal with emotions. He says that's squishy, I can do more math with cognitive parts. Kahneman always thought that we have to bring emotions into it and well-being. So Kahneman was a lot broader. Of course, Kahneman lived for many years beyond Tversky, and who knows? I think that Tversky's horizons would have been wider had he lived. But it would be fascinating to just sit there and listen to them describe that history.
Yeah, that would be a roundtable worth watching. We'd probably have to record it so we could save it for years. All right, we're going to gift a book to everybody that's listening. You get to gift one book to everybody. I've already gifted them all of your books. So they already have those in their hand. They're reading them. Well, if you could gift one other book, what would it be?
If it is not my books, especially this most recent one, there's been a collection of articles by Kahneman, Tversky, and Slovic that appeared really, I think, in 1982. And it has been really very beneficial for me, an eye-opener. So these are old papers, but my guess is that if advisors have that, they are going to have their eyes open in ways they have not been open now. They're going to learn about hindsight. They're going to learn about other cognitive and emotional shortcuts. They're going to be able to distinguish what is an error and what is a want, and so on. So get that. I cannot remember the title of it, but look for one that has Slovic, Kahneman, and Tversky as the editors.
That makes me think about The Undoing Project. Have you read The Undoing Project?
Of course I did.
And I think I've probably mentioned it on here like once every 20 episodes or so, because it was so instrumental in me, in my career, in my journey to doing what you just described, which is opening your eyes to, I guess you'd call it like mistakes, fallacies, biases that we fall prey to. It's the first book that made me go, we're not just rational. In fact, it almost made me start doubting myself with decisions that I'd make, because I'd be like, all right, hang on, is this right? Or are there things going on that I'm not making the right decision? But it was an eye opener in a way that I imagine those articles probably would be for a lot of people.
Yeah. One thing that I didn't know that I found out in this book is that a dispute between Kahneman and Tversky, because Kahneman thought that Tversky is kind of hogging the credit, that he's getting more credit for work that is really joint work. And so again, coming back to the issue of status, we really care about status. That is, Kahneman had tenured position, he could do his work and so on, but it really bothered him deeply that Tversky was kind of stealing the limelight, and it really soured their relationship. And it's really a message for us that we should be generous. If it is joint work, as I do, if it's joint work with Herr Schefrin, I mention Herr Schefrin. It is not just my work, and he is kind of on the side. He is a full co-author, contribute as much as I did. I would not be able to do it without him, and he would not have been able to do it with me. So it's kind of a true partnership.
Yeah, that's a great point. So next one, who is the best listener in your life? And then what does that person do so well that makes them such a great listener?
Well, my best friend, as in many marriages, is my wife, Nava.
Nice. Yeah.
We have different interests. She is a volunteer at the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We have our older daughter who is living with bipolar illness, and she has helped so many people and families. And she's interested in many things. There are laws that are proposed and so on. And she will tell me about that. And it's not really central to my interest, but of course I listen attentively. And my own work is not of great interest to her, but she will listen to it attentively. And of course, then we have subjects that are close to all of us. Our children really are central in it, but also, mundane things. Should we renovate this or should we not? And should we buy this or should we not? And, many times we disagree, but having been married for more than 55 years and not on the verge of divorce, we obviously do quite well and listen quite well to each other.
All right, last one. You get to put up a poster in the office or the room of everybody that's listening with a message on it. What would it say?
I would say the message would say, you are a well-being advisor. You enhance both wealth and well-being. That is for them to know that at the end of the day, when the client leaves the office, that they can say to themselves, I helped that client not just with his finances, but also with life, in small things or large. For example, for those people who have a ton of money but still find it very difficult to spend, find small ways to help them spend. Speak with their kids about doing what Nava, my wife, and her brothers did. I heard from somebody else who's said that his mom loves the opera, but she always buys the cheap tickets. So he goes out and he buys the best tickets for her, kind of forcing her to enjoy the opera even more. Good for him, and good for advisors who can guide their clients in the same way.
Yeah, those are some great examples. I love those. All right, so in the show notes, we'll put a link to the book. Make sure everybody knows where it is, where they can find it, how to access it. For anybody that's listening that says, "Hey, I want to go even deeper. I want to know more. I want to connect. I want to learn." What else can they do? Where else should they go if they want to go deeper to learn more? Or is there anything else they should do for the book?
Well, there's actually a site called ssrn.com.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a section there on behavioral and experimental finance. This is where people like me, scholars, post their papers, working papers, before they are published. So advisors can subscribe, it's free, and get that daily or weekly. And they can just scan through it, which I do. And I say, hey, this is interesting. I can read the abstract. If I want to, I can download the paper and read it in greater detail. So you really get kind of not one thing. You really get many things, and some things that you even did not know that you're interested in, you suddenly find that they are interesting and useful for you. So first, read my book, and second, subscribe to that website.
Perfect. Well, we'll put both of those in there. Meir, this has been 6 years in the making. Been looking forward to it. Enjoyed every minute of it. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's delightful to be with you, Brendan, and with all the listeners. I hope that people really enjoy it. And by all means, write to me. You know, my email address is mstatman@scu.edu. If you have comments, questions, anecdotes, please share them with me. I say, and I am honest that I say that I've learned from financial advisors as much as I taught them.
Well, we'll be back together again once we hit Generation 4, and we'll do another episode then. Thanks, Meir.
Thank you, Brendan.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Information here may be provided in part by third-party sources. These sources are generally deemed to be reliable. However, neither our guest nor RFG Advisory guarantee the accuracy of third-party sources. The views expressed here are those of our guest. They do not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, its employees, or its clients. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, LLC, RFG Advisory or RFG, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place. RFG Advisory is an SEC-registered investment advisor. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of RFG by the Commission, nor does it indicate that RFG or any associated investment advisory representative has attained a particular level of skill or ability.